I'm Joanne. Today I'm going to show you how making a three-colored quilt is actually a snap. This quilt idea comes from Donna Robertson of the Fabric Cafe in Tyler, Texas, who has created some simple instructions about how to make small quilts out of only 3 yards or meters of fabric. And check out the name of this one. I always love blue, but I'm also really excited to complement it with some purple fabric this time. Of course, I'm itching to get sewing, but there's quite a bit of prep work to do first. With all quilts, I like to sketch out my own color diagram so I can visualize which fabrics I'm using and where I'm heading with the project. Then I need to iron all of that lovely fabric and cut all the strips and pieces I'll need according to my pattern. My cutting mat and rotary cutter are essential for this part. By the way, if you see this term when you're reading a quilt pattern, it's not referring to this guy. It actually means width of fabric. Here are the strips I've cut of fabric number 1, the dark blue. And these are the teal fabric number 2 pieces. And finally, I've listed out here the purple number 3 fabric strips. Now we're getting to the fun part where we're going to start making our first quilt blocks. This sketch shows block A, for which I'll make 8 copies, including 8 of the 9.5-inch long dark blue strips which I've already cut. For the bottom sections of this block, made of blue and purple, I'll first sew together these 2 long strips of blue and purple fabric, keeping in mind that we always use a 1/4 inch seam when quilting. Then I'll carefully iron the fabric, pressing the seam towards the darker blue side. Finally, I'll cut 8 of these 2-colored 5 by 9.5-inch strips to form the bottoms of my blocks. And then I'll sew them together and press them. Those first 8 blocks were, well, you know. Creating 8 versions of block B is going to be exactly the same process we used in block A, except this time we're going to use teal and purple. Here are the 2 halves of block B ready to go, and now we'll sew them together to create the 8 blocks. That all went pretty quickly. So now I've sewn 16 of the 20 blocks needed for this quilt, all in a fairly short space of time. Finally, I'll be creating 4 sets of block C using these long strips of teal and purple fabric. Once I've sewn them together, I will cut 8 5-inch strips that look like this. As I sew together each pinned block, notice how the seams nest together nicely, as I've always continued to press the seams towards the darker fabric. I just have to be careful to keep the seams flat and pointing in the correct direction as I stitch. Here's the pressed back side of a block C with the seams nicely nested, and here are all 4 done, right side up. I've now sewn all 22 colored blocks, plus I've set the 4 solid dark blue blocks next to them. These are the main 24 squares for my quilt. Now I need you to shut your eyes for a few seconds while I rearrange these blocks into the order they should go for the quilt. Ta-da! It's like magic, isn't it? I know this might sound so 90s, as everyone seems to have hardwood floors these days, but I just love laying out my quilt blocks on our light Berber carpet. No slipping around or getting dusty. Now let's sew together each of these strips. There's the first one done, and the second, and the third. You You know, sewing and quilting are perfect ways to unplug from our computers and phones and get creative. Plus, it's super satisfying to make something with your own hands. I started to get excited about quilting when I saw some of the beautiful projects my mother-in-law Alice had made. Like this beautiful hand-quilted leaf blanket that she gave us many years ago. Look at all that beautiful detail. Quilting teaches us things too, like how to blend colors together and how to make interesting geometric designs. But it also teaches us things like patience and how to pay attention to detail and how to be alone with our own thoughts. Back to our strips, here are the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th. And now I've sewn all 6 strips together, connecting together the 24 quilt blocks for this quilt. My next step will be to take the long teal strips and sew them together end to end, and then I'm going to make a border around the quilt. First I'll do the long sides, and then I'll do the shorter sides. After that, I'll do the same with the purple, and after that, I'll do the same with the dark blue. Here's border 1 completed, and border 2, and border 3. I love how these borders really help the blocks in the middle stand out and catch the eye. Thanks so much for joining me to make this quilt with 3 meters of fabric. Please join me in my next video when we will finish off this quilt with 3 layers, some machine quilting, and some binding. I think it's going to be a snap. If you've enjoyed this video, please press like and subscribe to my channel so you can join me to complete this It's a Snap quilt and learn about other great crafting projects.